so what are examiners looking for in these short answer responses? Well, first of all, they want an answer to the question that is asked, not one that you've prepared and regurgitated, but a proper answer to the question that includes accurate and relevant information, that uses the nominated sources, including specific reference to them and others as required, and that is concise. That is, it's written in the space provided. When we look to the examiner's comments about short answer questions, they tell us quite clearly, year after year, that concise, well-structured responses that address the question and are supported by relevant source material are able to gain full marks, and that you should be able to write appropriate answers in the space provided. I'd like to just take you to an example of a short response. This is a 6 marker, and there was a page of lines allowed for this one. The 2 sources that were referred to before this, source D and E, the source D was an image of a household shrine, and source E was a map of the forum in Pompeii. So candidates had to use those 2 sources, the household shrine, the forum at Pompeii, and this quote from Cicero: "The most sacred, the most hallowed place on earth is the home of each and every citizen. There are his sacred hearth and his domestic gods. There, the very centre of his worship, religion and domestic ritual." And putting those 3 sources together, you had to come up with an answer that would fill a page. And the question is, using sources D, E and F in your own knowledge, outline religious practices at Pompeii and Herculaneum. This is a sample answer, and this candidate has divided the answer into 2 paragraphs. The first paragraph deals with private religion, and the second paragraph deals with public religion. So if we look at that first paragraph, one of the things that would impress the markers straight away is the use of the historical terms and concepts. So lararium there in the first line, the pater familias, the domestic rituals, the ceremonies, the names of the goddesses and so on. So that first paragraph is quite detailed and accurate information about private religion at Pompeii and the evidence for it. If we look to the second paragraph, this paragraph is drawing on the source that shows the map of the forum, states which source is being used clearly, and then describes some of the temples that were in the forum and some of the rituals that were conducted in those temples. It also mentions the imperial cult and the temple of the genius of Augustus. It actually goes outside the given sources and says beyond the forum. So this candidate is not only using the sources that are there, but is drawing on additional sources. Beyond the forum, there was a temple to Isis. And the important thing with this response is that it acknowledges that there are no temples yet found in Herculaneum. It would be very easy for a candidate to think, oh well, there aren't any temples in Herculaneum, so I won't refer to that. But the question, if we go back to the question says religious practices at Pompeii and Herculaneum. So you need to respond to all parts of the question. So there in the final sentence, as yet no temples have been excavated in Herculaneum, although shrines and frescoes suggest that many gods were worshipped, including Hercules, Mercury and Neptune. Okay, the final question in the core section of the paper is drawn from one nominated area of the syllabus, the section called Investigating, Reconstructing and Preserving the Past. This is the section that deals with the methods of archaeologists, methods and contributions, their interpretations, changing interpretations, issues of conservation and reconstruction, and ethical issues. Now, the problem with nominating the section of the syllabus for a particular question is that candidates might be tempted to write prepared responses. I would strongly encourage you not to do that. Markers can pick a prepared response at 102 paces, so you really need to prepare yourself thoroughly by doing an evidence table, by revising your notes, so that when you come into the examination you can answer whatever question is asked, rather than hoping to fit your prepared response to the question. So if we look at what the examiners said last year, that your answer should be a response to the question asked, not a prepared response. This question does not require a response in formal essay structure, a lengthy introduction, body and conclusion. You really don't have time, you've only got 2 pages. You need to answer with relevant information in a concise response. So if we look at this question from last year, to what extent has research since the end of the 1960s changed our understanding of the evidence from the sites of Pompeii and Herculaneum? And you need to refer to 2 sources and your own knowledge in this question. These were the 2 sources: excavated remains, human remains from Herculaneum, and a little quote from Penelope Allison: "To translate a cubiculum as a bedroom or oikos as a dining room is to assume that an unchanging function has been established for these excavated spaces. It's also an unvalidated assumption that each Latin term is equivalent to a modern term." The examiner's comments for the responses there showed the qualities that scored the higher marks. They were responses that engaged with both sources, provided a range of relevant information from the student's own knowledge, and made a judgment about research since the 1960s. If we go back to the question, to what extent requires a judgment? And we'll deal with that in a moment in another section of the paper, but you did need to make a judgment, not just a description. They've integrated information from the research of Sarah Bicel and Estelle Laser on human remains. Even though the sources didn't mention those 2 archaeologists, people who know this topic would know the work of Bicel and Laser and their disagreements over the interpretation of human remains. Better answers grasp the ideas presented in source G about conflicting interpretations. And better answers also made reference to other research, for example, Wilhelmina Jaszczymski or Mackenzie Clark, Wallace Hadrill, and so on. However, you didn't have to do that to get full marks. You didn't have to go outside the given sources. The examiners made a point of saying those who confine themselves to issues raised in sources F and G exclusively, but provided a detailed assessment, also gained marks in the top range. So you need to refer to the sources, bring in your own knowledge, answer the questions that it has been asked, and write a concise response.